The average rate of change for this video, we're going to use two of these, the two formulas that are shown here. And average rate of change is synonymous with slope. So that's why one of the formulas might look familiar. Y sub 2 minus Y sub 1 over X sub 2 minus X sub 1. And the next one that we will use is F of B minus F of A all over B minus A. So for my first example, I have a function that's shown here, which is a square root graph. So that, make sure you understand what your different graphs look like. What I'm looking for is 2 points that I can actually use so that I can substitute it into one of the two formulas. I'm going to use the first one since I have 2 points. So it doesn't matter how I label it, but I'm going to go from bottom to top. So X sub 1, Y sub 1, X sub 2, Y sub 2. And then I simply will substitute in where that information is located. So Y sub 2 minus Y sub 1 goes on top. So that's going to be 3 minus 2. And then on bottom, X sub 2 minus X sub 1. So that's 6 minus 3. And now I just simplify it. 3 minus 2 is 1. 6 minus 3 is 3. So my average rate of change for this particular square root function graph is 1/3. I can also see my average rate of change in a table. So I just have to know how it works. So I'm looking at both my X columns and my Y columns to see what's the difference between them. So like if I have first differences, then that are constant, I know it's going to be a linear graph. If my second differences are constant, then it's going to be a quadratic. What does that mean? What does it take to go from -13 to 9? Well, I had to add 4. And then if I take -9, how did I get to -5? Same thing. I'm adding 4. And each time you will see the difference is I'm adding 4. On the X column, what did I have to do to go from -2 to -1? Well, I had to add 1. And then from -1 to 0. Again, I'm adding 1. -1 plus 1 is 0. And then 0 plus 1 is 1. So if I recognize my slope formula, I always put the Y on top. And I told you at the top is Y sub 2 minus Y sub 1, but just looking at the table, since I only have, I could use 2. I am going to actually use 2. I'm just going to grab any 2 and put it in my formula, but I can really just look at this and see it's 4/1, which means my slope is going to be 4, or my average rate of change, but let's just do it the correct way. So Y sub 2 minus Y sub 1 all over X sub 2 minus X sub 1. Again, I can choose any one of these pairs. Let's just take this. So I'm going to go with -1 being Y sub 2 and 3 being Y sub 1. And then on the X side, 1 is going to be X sub 2 and 2 is going to be X sub 1. And now I just substitute in. I didn't have to go in that order. I didn't have to pick that pair. I could have used whatever I wanted. So -3. And now for X sub 2, I have 1. And the formula says to subtract it from X sub 1, which is 2. And now if I simplify this, -1 plus -3 is -4. And 1 minus 2 is -1. Well, I can further simplify that. And that becomes a positive 4/1, which is really 4. And this is what I said earlier. Your average rate of change when given the table is going to be 4 for this particular table. Now, if I go to example 3, I want to use that other formula. I'm given a function, and I'm also given an interval. Now, these are my X values. I have to find my Y values. How do I find my Y values? Well, remember, F of X means Y. So all I'm going to do is just substitute. This is going to be my A, and this is going to be B, because I need an A and a B for my formula. And I'm just going to substitute one at a time. So for my F of A, I'm going to just substitute in that 1. This 1, okay? And the function that's given is negative x. Well, instead of x, I'm going to replace it with 1. Squared plus 2, I have another x. I'm going to replace that with 1. Minus 1, and now I just simplify. So negative 1 squared is simply 1. 2 times 1 is 2, and then negative 1. Further simplifying that, f of a will be 1, negative 1 plus 2, which is positive 1, and then 1 minus 1, which is 0. Now I'm going to do the same thing for f of b. So for f of b, I'm going to substitute this time 3 over 2 because I'm getting that information from the interval that was given. And in doing that, negative, and I'm going back here to the function that was given, and I'm going to, every time I see an x, I'm going to replace it with 3/2. So 3 over 2, and I'm told to square that, plus 2 over 3 over 2 minus 1. And inside of the parentheses, I have to take the numerator and square it and the denominator and square it. But I have a negative on the outside, so negative. And then that's going to be times 3 squared, which is 9, over 2 squared, which is 4. Plus, and diagonally, those numbers look the same, so I simply have 3 minus 1. Further simplifying this, I'm going to have negative 9 over 4 plus 2. Well, if I have a fraction and a whole number, I have to convert the whole number to a fraction which has the same denominator. So I'm going to take 4, which is the denominator I already have, and I'm going to multiply it times 2. Well, 4 times 2 is 8. Well, what's 8 divided by 4? It's another way of writing 2, right? There I go with my hand, sorry. Okay, so now I can simplify this further, and negative 9 plus 8 is negative 1 all over 4. So for example 3, my average rate of change, is not that. I have one more step. I actually have to go to the formula that's in purple here and substitute what I know. So what I know is that f of b is negative 1/4. And then I'm going to subtract it from f of a, which we said was 0. And that's all over b, which is 3/2, minus a, which is 1. It looks worse than what it is. And now I'm going to further simplify. So the top stays the same because I did nothing. I subtracted 0 from it. On the bottom, that 1 has to become a fraction. So I'm going to use the same denominator that I used over here, which is 2. Multiply it times that 1, and that's going to give me 2. So 2 divided by 2 takes the place of 1. And now if I simplify this, 3 minus 2 is 1, and then I have a common denominator of 2. And so now what I have to do when I'm dividing a fraction by a fraction is take the reciprocal and multiply it. So negative 4 times reciprocal just means I'm going to switch my denominator and my numerator. And so now I have 2 over 1. And then what I do is I can just multiply across, or I can cross simplify. So I know that 4 can be divided by 2, which leaves me with the 2 here. And 2 divided by 2 is simply 1. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. And then 2 times 1 is 2. So this is my actual answer, my average rate of change. Okay, now I'm going to go on to example 4. And I was asked to find an equation of the secant line that intersects the given points on the function. So I have information that's already given that I could use if I wanted to. So I could take those points that are shown here, and I can use that formula y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. I could do that, or I could just look at the graph. That's what I'm going to do. So if I look at my graph and I'm looking at the point where they intersect, both graphs. So here's a point and here's a point, which is really what this is. They're telling me at negative 1 and 1, that's this one over here. And then they're saying at 2 and 4, that those are my points of intersection. So what I want to do is write it in slope form because I'm trying to find the equation of that line, and my line will be in slope-intercept form. That's what I meant to say. So I need to identify not only my slope, but also my y-intercept. Remember, your y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis and your x is 0. So that will be here. So that's at point 0, 2. My y-intercept is going to replace b. So that's going to be a 2 there. My slope, I can either go to the top and do that formula that I said before, or I can just go to my graph and just count. So from my y-intercept, if I go up 1 and then over 1, there's a point. If I go up 1 and over 1 again, there's another point. I could also go the opposite direction, -1, -1. So what I see is no matter which way that I go, I have a slope of 1. So all I have to do now is just write y equals. I don't have to put the 1, but if you do, because it makes you feel comfortable, it's okay. This is actually my final answer. And that's without even having to do work. But had I did the work, I would have actually labeled this x sub 1, y sub 2, x sub 2, y sub 2, and then followed my formula, and 2 minus -1, and simplify this, and that's 3 over 3. And we know a number divided by itself is simply 1. So again, this would have given me that would have given me my average rate of change, or my slope, which is 1. And that's what goes here. And again, I could just look at my graph and see where my y-intercept is located and finish out my actual equation. Another way that you could have done that is to actually use your point slope form. And I just picked the point -1 and 1, this one, but you could have used the other one if you wanted to. And I already knew my slope. I just did the slope. So I just substituted that information in here, here, and here. And once I substituted it all in, I simplified it and I ended up with the exact same answer. So there's multiple ways to do this. Okay. All right. So that is how you find the average rate of change. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have an awesome day.